In 1964, Pontiac engineers built a sports car that was lighter than a Corvette, cheaper than a Corvette, and potentially faster than a Corvette. And that is exactly why General Motors killed it. This is the story of the Pontiac Banshee, the car that was too good for its own good, and one of the greatest what-ifs in American automotive history. To understand why the Banshee matters, you have to understand what Pontiac was in the early 1960s. This was not the stodgy, conservative brand it had been through most of the 1950s. Under the leadership of people like Seaman Bunky Knudsen and then John DeLorean, Pontiac was being transformed into one of the hottest names in Detroit. DeLorean, in particular, was a different kind of executive. He pushed hard, he bent rules, and he had a vision for Pontiac that went far beyond what GM's corporate structure was comfortable with. You want proof of that? The GTO. In 1964, GM had a strict policy against putting large displacement engines into mid-size cars. DeLorean found a loophole, stuffed a 389 cubic inch V8 into the Tempest Le Mans, called it an option package instead of a separate model, and essentially ignited the entire muscle car era. That was the kind of guy he was. But while the GTO was getting all the headlines, something even more ambitious was happening behind closed doors at Pontiac. Design work had already started in August of 1963, and DeLorean's team was cooking up something that nobody at GM had quite seen from Pontiac before: a purpose-built, two-seat sports car. They called it Project XP833, and the world would eventually know it as the Banshee. The XP833 was designed with a clear target in mind. Ford had just launched the Mustang, and the Mustang's sales numbers were shocking everyone, including Ford. Every major American automaker was scrambling to put together a response. DeLorean pitched the XP833 to GM management as a Mustang fighter, which was a smart piece of politics on his part. Framing it as a response to Ford made it sound a lot less threatening to Chevrolet's Corvette than it actually was. Because here's the thing, the Banshee was not built like a Mustang, it was built like a proper sports car. DeLorean worked alongside engineer Bill Collins, who was the technical architect of the project. What they came up with was genuinely impressive. The car rode on a 90-inch steel platform chassis, notably shorter and more nimble than the heavy A-body perimeter frame that underpinned GM's intermediate cars at the time. They clothed that chassis in a two-seat fiberglass body, styled with a long, sweeping hood and a short rear deck that just screamed speed and purpose. Two drivable prototypes were built. The first was a silver hardtop coupe, powered by Pontiac's new overhead cam inline-6, a 230 cubic inch unit that was still a prototype at the time and would debut in the 1966 Tempest. That hardtop weighed in at just 2,200 pounds. The second prototype was a white convertible fitted with a V8. Now, let's talk about that weight number for a second, because it tells you everything. At 2,200 pounds, the hardtop XP833 was nearly 800 pounds lighter than a comparable C3 Corvette. 800 pounds. That is not a small margin. That is a completely different category of automobile. Even the V8 convertible version, which was heavier, still tipped the scales at roughly 2,862 pounds, still about 500 pounds less than the Corvette it would have competed against. The planned engine options didn't stop at the inline-6 either. Pontiac had an extensive options list in mind that included a series of V8s with projected output expected to exceed 300 horsepower in high-output trim. With that kind of power-to-weight ratio, the performance numbers would have put the Banshee firmly in Corvette territory, or possibly ahead of it. In fact, the V8 version was reportedly fast enough to hit 60 miles per hour in second gear alone. Think about that. The styling was executed by some genuinely talented designers: Jack Humbert, Ned Nichols, Paul Gillen and Chuck Jordan were among the names involved. The result was a car that looked like nothing else on the road at the time, low, aggressive, and elegant all at once. The influence of that design would show up in unexpected places for years to come, but we'll get to that. Let's spend a moment on that overhead cam 6, because in the context of 1964 American automotive engineering, it was genuinely advanced. Most American engines at this time were pushrod designs, reliable, proven, and easy to manufacture, but not exactly cutting edge in terms of engineering sophistication. The OHC Straight 6 that Pontiac was developing for the Tempest was something different. By placing the camshaft directly in the head rather than down in the block, you got better breathing, a cleaner combustion chamber design, and more rev potential than a comparable pushrod engine. Rated at 165 horsepower in its base state of tune, the OHC6 wasn't going to win drag races against the big V8s, but in a 2,200-pound car, it didn't need to. The weight advantage transformed what would otherwise be modest output into genuinely spirited performance. This was European sports car thinking applied to an American platform. Light car, efficient engine, balanced dynamics. Not brute force, intelligence. And that, honestly, was part of what made the corporate brass so nervous. The Banshee wasn't just a threat on a spec sheet. It represented a different philosophy entirely, one that could have pulled buyers away from the Corvette without ever needing to match it horsepower for horsepower. In 1964, DeLorean presented both prototypes along with a full production plan to GM management. By all accounts, everyone in that room was impressed with the car. The styling was stunning, the concept was coherent, and the price point would have undercut the Corvette significantly. And that was the problem. GM had a very carefully maintained pecking order. The Corvette sat at the top of the performance hierarchy, and everyone below it, Pontiac, Buick, Oldsmobile, was expected to stay in their lane. It wasn't just about ego, it was about protecting a product line. The Corvette was GM's halo car, its proof of concept for American performance engineering. If a cheaper, lighter Pontiac could embarrass it, what did that say about the Corvette? GM executives were also acutely aware of who they were dealing with. DeLorean had already shown with the GTO that he was perfectly capable of slipping a performance product past corporate guidelines if given the opportunity. They knew that if the Banshee went into production, DeLorean would eventually find a way to drop a big block under that hood. And a big block in a 2,200-pound car, that would have made the Corvette look slow. So the order came down: cease further development. Project XP833 was killed before it ever saw a showroom floor. Here's where the story takes a twist that's almost too ironic to believe. After killing the Banshee to protect the Corvette, GM turned right around and handed the XP833 clay model over to Chevrolet's design team. A memo dated September 10, 1965, instructed GM's head of design to update the XP833 clay, reflecting a Chevrolet design for the two-passenger version. That car, the one that started as a Pontiac sports car proposal, was essentially reworked into the 1968 C3 Corvette. The Mako Shark II concept that preceded the C3 drew heavily from the Banshee's DNA. So GM killed the Banshee to protect the Corvette, and then used the Banshee to design the next Corvette. You genuinely cannot make that up. The XP833 prototypes themselves had a narrow escape from destruction. GM's standard policy for concept cars at the time was to send them to the crusher, but engineers Bill Collins and Bill Killens reportedly smuggled the two prototypes away in shipping containers, hiding them for nearly a decade before eventually purchasing them from GM directly. Both prototypes survive today and are in private hands. The silver hardtop has been displayed at the prestigious Meadowbrook Hall Concours d'Elegance and has appeared at various shows over the years. But the Banshee's legacy lives well beyond those two cars. The styling influence on the C3 Corvette is clear to anyone who puts the two cars side by side. The long hood, the short deck, the overall proportions. The Corvette that launched in 1968 owed a significant debt to the car Pontiac was building in 1963. The Opel GT, which debuted in 1968 as a compact European sports car, also shows obvious visual kinship with the Banshee's design. And then there are the Pontiac Firebird's taillights. The first-generation Firebird, which launched in 1967, carried a taillight design that was nearly identical to what appeared on the XP833 prototypes. So while Pontiac never got its sports car, at least a piece of the Banshee's design managed to make it onto the road. There's also an argument to be made that the Firebird itself was the indirect result of the Banshee's cancellation. After the XP833 was killed, Pontiac continued developing sports car concepts. The Banshee name lived on through additional concept cars all the way into the late 1980s. And when GM eventually greenlit a Pontiac performance car built on the Camaro platform, the Firebird was born. It wasn't what DeLorean had envisioned, but it was something. The Pontiac Banshee is one of those stories that sticks with you because it wasn't killed by failure, it was killed by success. It was too fast, too light, too affordable, and too well conceived. It made the Corvette look bad on paper, and in GM's world, that was unforgivable. DeLorean would eventually leave General Motors in 1973, famously frustrated with corporate bureaucracy. Whether the Banshee episode contributed to that frustration, we can only speculate, but the pattern was consistent. Every time Pontiac came up with something truly exciting, the corporate hand came down. What we're left with are two surviving prototypes, a few photographs, and the question that every car enthusiast eventually asks when they see this thing. What would American performance history have looked like if this car had made it to a dealership? We'll never know, but the fact that we're still talking about it 60 years later says everything about what the Banshee really was.